Thank you so much. We're delighted to have you here talking with these two wonderful writers, the queens of French noir and crime fiction, as they have been described. I can't promise I'll deliver on everything that our wonderful MC has talked about, but let's start with the first and most important question, which is what is it that brought you to crime fiction? What is it that excites you about it as a genre, and what is it that compelled you to write these wonderful books that you write?
I started with crime fiction because crime novel, you always in entertainment. It's not the writer who lives in Paris and is wondering if his life it's always a story. Story with a start, with a murder, with investigation, with a lot of twist. It's just fun, Paula. And also, for the writer, it's you get a track. It's you get to go straight to the point, straight to the end, and you get station like a train. You had to present characters, but you get to show the murder. You get to show a lot of things, and so it's cadré. It's ouais. You already get a track to, and so it's comfortable when you start to write.
Lovely. What about you, Johana?
Well, I have a mother who was a teacher, and she wanted to get me to read very early because if not, it was very embarrassing, and I didn't like reading. So it was absolutely terrible. So she had heard that Agatha Christie was translated wonderfully. And it was actually a writer from the South who has said that. So my mother bought me The Mysterious Affairs at Styles. And she gave it to me. And that was a revelation. I totally fell in love with Hercule Poirot. And then, but it's weird, right? I mean, it was weird, short, bold, with a mustache, Belgian, not even French.
Fighting words.
So, my God, not good. But it was yes, it was really a revelation. And then we used to go with my father to a little second-hand bookshop in the town where I am from, in Provence. And every Saturday I was going there with my father to buy books which were at the time 80 cents of francs. I mean, it was nothing. And I bought the whole collection there. So that's how we started. So when I had to write, of course, that genre just came, you know, as it was almost automatic. It had to be. There had to be some dead people in there, sure. So.
I was for a very long time convinced that Miss Marple was Indian. Inquisitive woman, always sticking her nose in everyone else's business. As Indian as it gets. Johana, you mentioned your mother, and I'd like to ask, anyone who's read your work, history is inextricably linked to every facet of what you write. And I did a little reading, and I read about your grandfather, who seemed marvelously interesting. He survived Buchenwald. He fought in the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah.
We see this in your books. In The Keeper, you talk about the Whitechapel murders.
Yes.
In Block 46, you talk about, of course, about Buchenwald. What is it about history that fascinates you so much? Is it an intellectual curiosity? Is it an innate morbidity? A voyeurism, perhaps?
That is something that really started very early, my love for history. And I think it comes down to the fact that my family, they're all psychologists. And they always were asking the question, why? Why did this thing happen? Even pushing that to the point of when I fell, for example, for my bike. I was a very active child. I was a tomboy. And they were like, oh, what did you hurt? Your left knee, not the right. So there were Freud was everywhere. And so asking questions, for me, to ask a question about people in general as a unity, you find I think the answer is history. Because I think history is the sum of all our individual stories. So that's why very early, to understand, for example, why you see me, I talk with my hands. So that is because I come from the South, and we all talk with our hands, but why? And this has all explanation. And I was very curious because I come from a family, they're Spanish, but the Spanish are very different from Catalan, don't mix them. Big mistake, and you don't mix them with French people. So I started digging into history to understand who I was, and then I got to understand so much more, got to understand about the world I was living in, and it has been a sort of obsession. So I think it's all of the above, all of what you mentioned. And of course, with my grandfather, but maybe we're going to talk about it later. My grandfather, so maybe we will not to take too much of the floor, but there is a big story behind that. So maybe I can.
Well, please go ahead.
You want me to go ahead?
Go
okay. So I'm going ahead.
Go.
Out of respect of my lovely colleague.
Okay.
So my grandfather was a man extremely celebrated in the town where I come from in Provence. Wherever I was going, there was an avenue with his name. You know, in the high school, they were telling me, "Oh, you, Johana." I was Lagunas at the time before being married. "Oh, so honored. You know, your granddad was such a wonderful man." And to me, he was not a wonderful grandfather at all. He was someone who was ignoring me, ignoring my questions. I was a history geek. He never wanted to tell me about his time in the wars. And he was not a good father to my father either. And what happened was that I moved to London 15 years back. And on the day I moved to London, and then my dad had a heart attack. So I had to fly back to Marseille without knowing if I would find my father alive again. And I was extremely close to my father. I am. And during that trip, to avoid getting extremely stressed, what I did is that I thought what kind of questions I would like to ask him. And I thought, actually, I would like to ask him about my granddad. I would like to ask him why there is a sort of bridge that was cut between a man who seems to be a humanist, a war hero, and you. And that's what I did, because I arrived, my dad was alive, and I stayed quite a while in Provence with him. At the time I was living in London. And my dad gave me basically 70 pages that my granddad had written. And that he has said to my granddad, I'm telling you this, I have every time, I have shivers all around my legs. And he said to my father, I didn't have time to publish this or to do anything about this, but please do something. And then I was with my father, was giving that to me and telling me, do something with this. So then I started reading those 70 pages, and there was quite a bit about Buchenwald. And I knew quite a lot about the Second World War, and I had read a lot as a geek. But then I basically investigated, and that's how I decided to write about this. And to write about this man discovering that someone who has suffered this much could not give love. And that created really a bridge that I needed to basically love someone who couldn't love me, or maybe he loved me in a certain way. So yes.
That's lovely and heartbreaking. Sophie.
I have nothing so beautiful to say. I can't.
Well, no, we must talk about The Awkward Squad. Wonderful book, and a truly wonderful cast of characters that you've invented. Could you tell us a little about where the genesis of that idea came from? And are these characters real? Are they based on real people? Most importantly, who do you identify with? Commissaire Anne Capistan or Rosieres, perhaps?
No, the characters, before the genesis, I wanted to write not really a crime novel. my obsession was to write a friend's novel. I like books with a lot of characters who speaks from the bond between characters, and I love crew and friendship and so on. So I wanted to write a book which you want to go in the book, to live with the characters, to take an apartment with the characters. So I had the ideas one day of a crew of misfit in the police, and that day I said to myself, wow, police idea, friends idea, go and work. So voilà, tout simplement. Basically, it was the start of this story, Poulet Grillé, for me. And then I'm not in the character. I don't identify to Capestan or Rosière. There's a little bit of me in each. In Rosière, in Capestan, I'm young and beautiful like Capestan. I'm rich and and very smart like Rosière. But I am each in each character. But there is no family, no friend of mine in the book, because you lost freedom when you choose to represent a friend or your mother and so on. You can't say, oh, this character is you and is a serial killer. No, you can do that. Or smile.
Well, as long as it's a young and beautiful and wealthy serial killer, why not take it? Well, okay, which brings me to the next. You've set me up for the next question perfectly. There's a large group of readers who believe there's something wrong with people who write crime novels.
Yeah, there is. Not me.
Other than me, we are perfectly normal. But so this question is only for you, Johana. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I suppose that's a question my mother-in-law is asking. And that might be why my husband is always so nice to me. No, I think that what fascinates me is the origin of evil. I'm really fascinated with that, because I'm really wondering what is the tipping point, that moment when even just by driving, if you made me drive in Mumbai, I would like to kill so many people on the road, but I wouldn't do it. So what is that point that makes you tip over and just do that? And it's so of course in serial killers there are many theories, and I was in Kerala last week, and I had a very bright student. I was in a international school, and one very bright student asked me, so what is wrong with psychopaths? Is there something in the DNA? Is there something in common with all of them? And I said to her, because I studied, of course, that to be able to write about profiling and everything, and I said to her, funnily enough, there is nothing about DNA. It's just a lack of love. And what all serial killers have in common is the fact that they had a very abusive childhood, to extents that we cannot imagine. And that actually fascinates me. And I have 3 boys. I'm the mother of 3 boys, and I'm yes. Oh God, yes. I have twins on top of that. They're just 5. Imagine the thing. So I'm always looking at them, hoping that I'm raising them the right way, And I'm wondering if sometimes, we always trying to be the best parents we can. but I'm wondering, am I doing enough for him to be the right person? And so that's why I'm studying basically evil to try to prevent it at my little,
It's the
family.
perfect thing to study if you want to raise your children well.
Yeah, right?
You can be cool all day and watch.
Well, I think we should actually talk about noir for a second, since that is what our session is supposed to be about. It's intriguing how a genre which was very popular in the 50s and the 60s has started to come back, particularly in Europe. Europe seems to be fascinated by noir. You have Nordic noir, of course, the Neopolar, the French novel. You have Mediterranean noir. I think pretty much every part of Europe has a distinct genre. In India, however, it's a genre that hasn't really started to boom. We have a few writers. One of the gentlemen in the first row, of course, who's writing noir. But do you think it's what is it about the dark side of humanity that fascinates the first world so much? Is it because you think beneath the facade of well-regimented and well-functioning society, there's actually a darkness seething and waiting to break free?
Maybe, but in France, the noir in the 70s was very political. Today, the noir is fun. It's not the word, but it's entertaining. And I think in France it's really the point. People want to read stories, and with thriller, they go to the dark side of the world, and so it's catharsis, and you can see all your fears, and but it's before all that, it's really stories, because in France we are really smart, and and there is a lot of books which are very smart, too smart. And when you're on holidays on the beach, you really need to read something not smart, and so you can buy poulet grillé. It's really not smart. It's very, but you get a great moment of reading and without questions, and you can see society, but you can see it with fun. En s'amusant, quoi. With, having fun. Yeah.
Well, I think setting is a big part. Atmosphere is a big part of noir. And I think some cities lend themselves to noir more readily than others. I mean, Paris, for example, in the pre-Haussmann years, Victorian London. Is there any time or place or city that you find particularly attractive, which you hope to someday write about? Maybe Bombay. Does Bombay lend it? I mean, Mumbai. Does it lend itself to noir?
Mumbai is a great place. I don't know the soul of the town.
Well, Johana's already killed a bunch of people driving here.
Yeah.
But the place is beautiful, and there is a lot of contrast. So it's rich for a story. Lot of contrast, poor, rich. It's a good start for a crime novel. It's very good start.
Well, I was living in London for 12 years, and I recently moved to Sweden, to actually close to Stockholm, an island on the east side, of Stockholm, called Lidingö. And because, of course, my name comes from my marriage. My husband is Swedish. And I had, of course, a contract with my publisher, but I was so late writing that book, and I didn't think normally, but I didn't think, and I didn't know what I would write about, and I was unpacking my boxes, and one of my best friend passed by home, and she says, "Oh, do you know that on the little island just in front of yours, you know the one where there are no cars?" And I say, "Yes, Storholmen." And she said, "Yes, but there is a haunted manor." And I said, "What?" So are you kidding me? She said, just by boat, it's like 5 minutes. I was like, wow. So I went to see that island and the manor, which was built during the Roaring '20s, and I was like, oh, that's scratching at me. We're going back to history, and I thought, and I contacted my agent, and I said, what about if I would write a Nordic noir? Could a French writer write a Nordic noir? Have the name going with it, so maybe I can. And I think that any place can inspire you. I think it's just what you see in that place. And I think noir can belong at wherever there is a human soul, there is darkness, you know. So I think that yes, we can find it anywhere. So Mumbai, yes, and Storholmen as well, and yeah.
Sophie, in the Awkward Squad, we see this marvelous eye to detail. In almost every sentence, there's this wonderful. You delve deeply into your characters' lives. Johana, in
Thank you.
all your books, the atmosphere is electric. There's a sense of foreboding, a tension almost in every chapter, which leads me to ask. They say that the 4 components of writing are plot, atmosphere, character, and setting. Which of them is your favorite? Which one do you love, and which one do you dread?
You've got to have the 4 to succeed in your book. But the most important to me is the character. Really, I think everybody's know Star Wars. But everybody has forgot the story, but nobody has forgot Dark Vador, Yoda. The characters are the most important, but they got to go deep in a story and be suffering and so on. But if you don't love them, if the reader don't love characters, he can't suffer with him. So there is no mystery, there is no tension, there is nothing. If the character, if you can't love the characters, for me, for my type of book.
No, I cannot agree more. I mean, it's. To me, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And for example, now I have a character with me, and I don't know why I called her Emma. I mean, and it cannot be, because my previous character was called Emma as well. So it's just funny. There is that young girl who is with me. That is the first thing that comes. Is a character. And how many times there were books that, series, and I didn't like the previous book, but I'm going to buy it, the next one, because I want to know what's happening to the character. So to me, that's what brings, because the plot and everything, this is what's happening to the character, and the setting is where the character is or going, so that to me is the main thing. But that said, I'm spending a huge amount of time on plot, because I need to plot a lot. I mean, I'm a plotter, so I know exactly where I'm going. And I'm leaving red herrings left and right, and I like to use double language when I'm writing. So what you read is not what you're reading, really. So I think, yes, it's everything.
But the plot is very important too. You get to know where you go, and it's annoying to read. You get to go fast to the end. So.
Well, I'm one of those people who actually reads the end first, and then pretends like I knew what the author was doing already. But of course, we have to talk about your process. Every writer has a unique process of how they write. Tell us about it. When do you write? Is it something? Do you have a set routine that you use? What's your favorite part? Do you like the first draft? Do you like the editing? I don't think anyone likes the editing, so let's leave that out. But do you like the what is it about writing the book that you enjoy the most?
My favorite part is when I write
The
the
end.
end. Ah, yeah. Good.
Not the royalty check.
And, and I go to Quai du Polar in France. It's a big festival, and I am happy. But no, I love all the parts of the work. But for my routine, I get to say that I have 2 kids, so my routine and it's when they sleep and when they go to school and when I can write. It's not so often I get to take every hour I can take. I don't choose. When I was younger, I could write in the morning, and now it's when I can.
Well, to me, it's the same. With 3 children, is a routine is just when they're at school, and exactly what Sophie was saying. But then I have to. I love all the parts, but I really enjoy research. So when I start reading, I'm the type of person who's going to go to the bibliography at the end and check all the books, and I cannot stop researching, and to the point that my agent asked me, "So where are you at?" Yeah, soon, I'm just because I just love learning more and more for the history to take kind of a bath into that period. I find that absolutely wonderful. And then you feel, because I need to know, it's not just to know how London was. I need to know what they ate, how they dressed, what everything. So I think it's the part that I love, and then the plotting. The plotting is I love that, because you need to find solutions which are so fine-tuned, and you need to understand where you're going to put that element and that element to trick the reader, and enjoy very much. And then it's kind of, having the bone and then adding the flesh, because the words then, when you write, are the flesh which are going around the skeleton. So I think all the parts are enjoyable. Yeah, very much so.
Could you tell us a little about books that have inspired you, authors that you look up to, that you aspire to emulate, perhaps? It's always a good question to ask.
Yeah.
Also, you can tell us about any authors you'd like to murder in a clever fashion.
My favorite books. In France, I don't know if you know Daniel Pénac, but in I don't know if it's translated in English. But Daniel Pénac is a writer which, after the 70s, the years, the political years, in the 80s and 90s, we go Daniel Pénac, which is the return of fun and lightness, and he was it's really good writer. Each word is in the good place. There is a lot of imagination. It's poetic, but it's also a really good story with amazing characters. Comment on dit surprenant? Surprising. Surprising character. You never know what they're going to do in the next pages. It's really I love this writer, and there is a lot of humor. It's not serious, but it's not political. It's just but it's just a good book. You start at the page 1, and you go to the end in one night. But I like Well, in the American, there is Armistice Maupin, Fanny Flagg, so it's not crime novel. I'm not a fan of American crime novel. There is too violence. I can't stand violence, so it's not easy when you write a crime novel. So they're kind murderer. They're always very kind when they kill people in my books. So no, I don't. I can't stand violence. So American often tough, and so hard boiled maybe. So, well.
Well, I've always read a lot of poetry, actually. And poetry and theater. Before writing, or at the same time as I was a journalist, because I was a journalist before, I was doing some acting in Paris a lot, and I was really, in love with reading theater and the classics. And one that was something that it was Cyrano de Bergerac by Edmond Rostand, and I always had it with me. And I took there was the scene when he's at the balcony and he tells his love for Roxane, and of course, imagine starting my life with that idea of love. I mean, that was hard, but it was that is something that when I was reading the world, it was the words. It made me feel that I was tasting something, and I thought writing that way, if I can just do close to 1% of that feeling and that's the thing, the beauty of the words, of the sounds of it was like music to me. So that's really what I saw. So Edmond Rostand, and then my favorite poets, and it is Baudelaire and Rimbaud, and I was very, very young when I was appreciating that. I remember going to lectures with my mother when I was really 13, 14, and really be interested in this. And then in crime, I really, really loved Braillard, who is a French writer.
Yes, I love Braillard.
Was really,
yeah.
And that was actually it's something that my grandfather was had in his library, and that was someone that I read with Agatha Christie. I could find very cheap book from the Mask.
Yeah, Braillard,
which is
you can see it in every library.
And of course, for me, the Agatha Christie that I made the biggest impression on me is Murder of the Orient Express, because I thought he was brilliant with it. Then I know all of them, and I was like, oh, that's brilliant. And she's someone who always fascinated me. And then there is one Scandi author that I absolutely loved, and he passed away, and I thought he was really brilliant. He was Henning Mankell, and he's a man who I think he didn't create the genre, because it was created in the 70s, but he brought so much to it, and there was really a sense of atmosphere with him, which was very, very strong. And he was writing for theater later on in life as well. So, yes.
Well, I used to love this obscure book by this writer called Della Corta, Diva. I don't know if you ever read it. And the other book which I really love is also Life, a User's Manual, Georges Perec.
Georges Perec.
Yes.
Wonderful book.
It's wonderful, Georges Perec.
And you mentioned the French romantics,
Yes.
Valéry and Rimbaud and Baudelaire. There's a deep-seated romanticism, I think, in crime fiction. Where, in fact, noir tends to dispel that, where most of the characters, especially the protagonists in noir, are flawed.
Yes,
and
completely. So true.
Which is, I think, a deeply Byronic thing, because Lord Byron talks about human flaws and how important do you think it is in many ways, the journey of a character in noir is a journey towards fixing that flaw, towards redemption.
Or not.
Or not, of course. So does that play a role in your work? Do you try to bring that in? We do see a little of that, maybe not so much in Sophie's, but...
Well, we definitely look for flaws and contrast and contradictions, and I think it's a key. It's the main problematic of any book. And you were talking about redemption. I think I'm writing for the platforms back in Scandinavia, and we were doing a study, market study, with my co-writer, my colleague, about what was the strongest elements, you know, for characters, and we realized that redemption was such a strong thing. I mean, someone who used to be someone is no one anymore and wants to bring back what it was, and it can be in your personal life. I mean, it can be, and that is fascinating. And we also realize the fact that if in a story there is an engine, a motor that Harlan Coben used a lot, is you always have someone disappearing. And we don't know where that person is, and we try to look for that person. And Harlan Coben that I met years back, was explaining to me, that's something I used a lot. I was like, damn, it's true, it's all in this book, and it works every time, and you don't realize it, because you're looking for that person. So there are some mechanisms like that. But yes, to go back to the flows, I think that's the key. We cannot have someone, I mean, someone who doesn't have flows in his life or anything is completely flat, and you want someone that we can grip, like when you do mountain climbing, that you can grip to the thing, where we use that to create empathy or other feelings. I mean, serial killers, I mean, create hatred or agony even when you see certain things. So, yeah.
Sophie, would you care to?
Yeah, more than flow, I love to write about losers and misfit and all people, all talentless people, but faithful.
Yeah.
I love the enthusiasm of the idiot. A good idiot applied and with a lot of goodwill can surprise you more than every Tarzan. Tarzan's time, it's over. Yeah. Now you get the stupid rabbit, and so this kind of hero of characters are for me more interesting. And yeah, my crew, the Awkward Squad, it's just a crew of police of yeah,
they were fired from the police.
Well, they are fired of the good squad, and they go to a lost apartment. They're rejeté.
They're rejected?
Rejected by everyone. And but they're together, and so they're happy to have someone for investigate with, and so they find enthusiasm and motivation, and they succeed. But they succeed when with their own capacity, which are very very small. But they can do it.
Well, we're going to ask open for questions in just a minute, but I'd like to ask one last question before that. Do you have any advice for any budding crime writers out there, or budding criminals, either?
Criminals, plenty, obviously. But we should not share. But I would say never stop writing and never stop to know. I have friends who are extremely well-known writers now, and they had 10, 15 years of rejections, 1,000 letters, and some people who write wonderfully well. A very good friend is called R.J. Ellery, and is British, and he had years and years and years of rejection, and he writes beautifully. And one day someone just, you know. So I think, yes, to never stop, and don't let to know stop you, and accept criticism. That is very important, because, and that's why, for example, we have editors to correct books, and of course to read, because we can just learn by reading. So reading is key. Yes.
Yes, read a lot and work a lot. You get to stick to the chair and write. But often when you started, when you're a beginner, you go and write the first sentence, and then you read the first sentence, and you say, "Oh, I rewrote the first sentence, and I rewrote the first chapter, and always the beginning of the start of the book."
Oh, yes.
And I think you get to write, and try to go to the end. And when you're to the end, you get a lot of paper, and that's great. You're confident, and so you can rewrite, but not before. I know a lot of writers who are always writing the same sentence because they want perfection. And there is no perfection. There is choice. So there is bad choice. Yeah. There is bad choice you can keep and hope that it works, but you can just stick to the chair.
Well, any questions? Would anyone like to ask questions? Our wonderful panelists would be happy to answer them. Please, you can ask anything. Somebody once asked me at a crime panel what the best way to kill their wife is and get away with it. So we are open to all questions. Anyone at all? Is this the wife-related murder question?
It's not yet married. So I had a question. You talk about. So I had a question. You talk about the editing process, like after you have your material down. How intense is the editing process, and like how long? Just if you can give us an example, like how long can that take? Is it do you all set a specific time frame to complete that? Can that get to the point where you're just like, I need to work with somebody else? How does this, how intense can that be?
That depends a lot. Stephen King, who is not so bad, has received a lot of lettres refus. Rejection letters, a lot, for many years. My first novel, it's okay, and I'm not so good than Stephen King. Really not. So you just have to take a chance and to hope that it's working, and to find the good person for your book at the right moment, and it's lucky, good luck. But it can take. I send it during 2 years, my material, before editing, and it's long. Il parlait pas de...
No, il parlait de because in French, the word editing is publishing. So we get confused very often.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm so sorry.
No, but it was very interesting.
Wait, it was interesting. It was
It's good
not
to know.
a
It's good
question.
to know.
No, il parlait editing. Correcting, we would say in French. That's why. Is un mauvais ami. Éditer ton truc.
C'est corriger.
Corriger. Donc c'est la question, c'est la correction.
Okay. It's good too. I like to do it too.
Combien
editing,
de temps ça peut prendre?
Well, it's 2 months. 2-3 months. I write my material 2 times, and then the third, it's just to be sure that it's all perfect, and this word is at the good place, and But, 2 months.
I think it's very relative, because it depends how you write. For me, I spend a lot of time. Well, a lot of time. No, I write fast, but it's not. It's just that I spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to write, and actually, I do not rewrite. I don't. So I'm going to do my research, spend a lot of time. I plot. I know exactly. I know what the characters will do. I spend a long time to the despair of mud. After that, when I write my latest novel, which will be out in January, wrote it in 7 weeks. And I didn't rewrite. And then it goes to editing, though. Goes to first my father, then I have my best friend, they read, they send it back to me, and then my sister, and then to my agent, and then it's corrections. But I don't rewrite. I think we all different. We write in all different ways. And I have friends who have a first draft, and then a second, and then a third, and then a 10th. I mean, it's whatever is suitable for you. And to it's not a degree of perfection, because it's like Sophie was saying, perfection doesn't exist. Yeah. I love what she said, it's just about choices. And sometimes by choices, your bad choice will be the right one for your agent or the reader. So it's completely relative. And what she said that I love as well is the fact that it's art, right? So, you're gonna read a book and say, oh, it's a bad writer and she got published, it's so unfair, and then you're gonna have a great one but this is not how we need to look. We just need to persevere. And it's not, it's not like mathematics, it's not obvious. So you just need to find, as Sophie was saying, the right person who's gonna like your book, and it will happen at some time, for sure.
My new one took 26 years.
You see? There we go.
So I just want to
buy life insurance.
I just wanted to follow up on this editing question. So in India, we don't have specialist crime fiction editors, right? But we do have that in the West. Right? So I just wanted to, if you could share your experience with specialist crime fiction editors, because that brings a totally different flavor to crime writing. As opposed to, because I've had that struggle many times with my editors, because in India we don't have crime fiction editors, so they just are not familiar with the genre, so, and the beats and the way you kind of plot, etc. And so they, so I have always a sort of a tenuous relationship with them. But have you experienced working with a non-crime fiction editor and a crime fiction editor, and if anything, what is the difference?
Well, I haven't experienced with a non-crime fiction, but I know my agent. She was my editor before, and it's very, because she loves to correct on on paper. So she PDFs me her note, which are handwritten. And what is really interesting is to see, because I follow her first read. So you have and she says, okay, I don't understand why you turned that sentence that way, but that must be because something is happening after. So she has that in her mind, that she knows that sometimes, I don't know, you're saying, oh, she had a red dress and there is no importance to that, but it's important for later. Or your sentence is talking about that guy that you talked already before, but you're not talking about him really, so she leaves it. And I think that's what you have. You don't have to over-explain, and say, no, but listen, just trust me on this. If that is there, it's because page 187, then he's going to do this, so leave it. And the only thing is that you have different schools. And for example, you can have some publishers in different countries, so I mean different schools in different countries. And what I have sometimes is I have some publishers abroad who are telling me, I don't know, can you explain this? Which in France would say, oh, that is over-explaining. We don't like this. We just like a little ellipse, and so it's, it's different schools. But what is nice is indeed we don't have to fight for, I don't have to fight for my ways and just to straight away true. Because I never thought about that. It's very interesting. So it must be hard for you though.
Yes, it is.
Exactly. Because you must, yes.
It's so true. Well, crime editors are the best to do this. And so it's they're good to novels are not crime novel. They're the best for the crime novel, but they can do other book,
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
type of book. I
And
don't. I get a novel which is not a crime mystery. It's a dystopic comedy with animals, so it's far away from Poulet Grillé. And I get the same editors for this book, and she can do this, so really, really good. But for crime, it's.
Well, thank you. Thank
We
you.
have
for sharing.
time for one last question.
I'm coming from a film background, and I'm more used to writing screenplays, but I just always wanted to be a fiction writer. So I have a pointed question, maybe you can help me with. There's a lot of, in film we write our outline, like a step outline, and then we go expanding on the scenes or the sequences, and then come the scenes, because then that way an original story can be formed, or even if you're taking from somebody else's material and making a film out of it. But in book, like you have to be original, because it can't be off something else unless it's research. So how do you also plot it first and then go expanding on chapters? Is that how you kind of focus, or?
I mean, to me, I plot first. This is my first thing. I plot. And I have basically the general story, like it's him and her, of course, character first, and then that's who the killer is. And then basically I'm expanding, I'm stretching the story, really. It's like my son told me once when he heard me doing a recording during COVID, he said, "Mama, it's exactly when you do bread, you just stretch the dough." And I said, well, in a way it is. When a small dough becomes large to make a pizza or whatever, well, that's the thing. So I stretch to the extreme, and I start, because now I'm doing the opposite of you. I'm starting writing for TV. But it actually is kind of similar.
Yeah.
Because you have the kind of the synopsis, and then you expand, and yeah.
The other thing is, using active and passive voice, because there is this, half the books that I landed up not reading are because midway I've given up on he said, she said, he said, and the character names. So I sometimes feel like how many he said, she saids can be removed from it.
Yeah.
So how do you overcome that? Like, is there a way of, do you use dialogue? Like, how do you do this?
I think in France we have something that is not like in the UK. We use lots of expressive words for he said, she said. And we're going to have, I don't know, he agrees, and or he's going to nod. And so we have all those, and what I do, I don't know, but I introduce my character talking, and then I let him be. And or I introduce by a look, because I hate those he said, she said, it drives me nuts. So and it drives me nuts when I read. So I try to do that, and the most I can. And it's really, when I write, I'm trying to be very careful with that. But these are kind of, how do you say, we all have things we really don't like when we write, and things we try to avoid, and we also have things that we're not supposed to do. And every time I have my agent tell me, you did that again, I say, oh, damn it. And that is, it's some tics that you have and you don't, so.
Starting sentences with adjectives.
Yeah?
Big
Starting
no-no.
sentences
Yeah.
with adjectives.
I think the trap. Sorry,
Yeah.
Sophie, would you like to?
Well, I love, not she said, but I love dialogue. I love this. My character are always talking a lot. But I try to, this is the bones, and I try to get some flesh, but they're talking, and this is the art of the action for me. So I don't write for TV, but I do some theater in my book.
There is just one thing that I want to add that to me is very important. That is a rule that I always have in mind when I write and when I'm doing my outline and everything. which I call my skeleton, by the way, because that's what I always have, that idea that showing is always better. Showing better than
showing.
recounting.
Telling, yeah.
Like, oh, he remembers the time. No, I'm going to show him. Oh, she remembered when her mother. No, I'm going to show her in that moment, you know. And always I try to show a situation, to show, for example, a relationship. She had a bad relationship with her mom. Well, I'm going to open the book with the mom calling her and being really awful. And then we're going to understand that there is nothing to be said. And that I really, really love. I'm enjoying doing that a lot. That is really a rule that I have in mind for everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
Pleasure.